Yeah, today is 17th May. We're having a MicroProfile technical call. Let me start sharing. Sure. So we continue talk about the release plan. So hopefully, I think it's today we just go through the options we have, and then is I mean we couldn't if we couldn't make a decision is couldn't reach consensus. We just open for the voting, and then we decide whether to vote in kind of the working group or vote in as a Google group. So let's go through the release options we have. So since the last time we spent kind of quite a few hours, we talk about all the releases, and then from the MicroProfile platform call last week. So I volunteered to write the Google Doc, share all the options we have, options I noted down. So it's one thing I think we already discussed, we have agreed we move to Java 11 when we align with the Jakarta EE10. So that's kind of we discussed settled. So it's one thing we haven't settled. Whether we for this year's release plan, do the 5.1 and then 6.0. So the option, I will go through the options, and then we can further conversation. So it's the option 1 is we release 5.1 in July and then release 6.0 in October, November. So 6.0 that will be a Jakarta EE10 alignment with Java version update. So for 5.1, so we propose to get the updated JWT Open API, and then do a release open tracing mark for removal from platform, make it standalone, and also add a config to disable the tracing, and then we will add a new spec telemetry. So for the October, November release, that will be a directed the align with the Jakarta EE10. So since we are moving the Java compilation version from 8 to 11, so all of the spec will have to go through a major release. Is so for this, and then at the same time, I think is all the a spec will wouldn't contain much change, except the metrics. The 5.0 will have some major backward incompatible changes. What? So for the go for it.
I was going to say, there's this zombie idea that I can't seem to kill. No matter how many times I try to kill it, that changing the compilation version means a major version bump in a specification. It absolutely does not.
Correct.
If you want to bump the major versions because of marketing reasons or any other frivolous reason, by all means, I don't want to stop you. But if you believe it has to be done because you're changing the Java version, that is absolutely false.
Right. Okay. So
don't list that as the reason here.
Okay. Well, and not to mention, there's a on that particular note, if there is nothing in the API that's changing to take advantage of a newer Java language version, we shouldn't be specifying the language version has changed.
Yeah, so I think we discussed that in the past, and I think people want to move the compilation version, want to do a big bang release. Actually, in the first, I advocate so we move the Java version whenever we want. So for some spec, as you say, if we want to take advantage of for example, some of the nice features, like a record or something, that spec can go ahead to bump their version. For other spec, they can continue to stay with 8. However, I think at that time is people, I mean, I think a consensus is move as a big bump. Yeah.
Yeah, but as BJ said, that's never been the consensus, and it keeps coming back as the consensus. So that's the objection.
Right, because it basically says right here, we're bumping major versions because of the compilation version change, and that is wrong. That is not the reason.
We need to vote on this so we can just get this done with
So let's
on that particular aspect.
Yeah. So basically, I think maybe it's kind of the consensus we kind of agreed on the call, some call.
There was never consensus on any calls. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
I don't ever recall a call that I was on where that didn't get mentioned, where I didn't object.
Okay. So
Yeah,
let's do another vote. Like
well, it's at some level, it's not. It's if you want to vote to change the major version, that's fine. But the technical reasons are not up for debate. They're just technical reasons, right? It's a fact, right? The fact is that the compilation, the whole point of the versioning is to communicate to users of the specification something has changed. And from a user's point of view, if I've written an app that runs against your spec, it's still going to run against your spec when you recompile your APIs to 11, because yes, I'll need a Java 11 runtime, but my application is completely fine.
Okay.
So when you bump the major version, you're telling your users they have to jump through some hoops to keep using your spec.
Or there's some significant marketing changes that,
right? Yeah,
as you were saying earlier.
Right. So sometimes you do it because it's flashy from a marketing point of view, but there's no technical reason. And so I don't think that's a thing that's really a debate.
BJ, I disagree. There is a technical reason. If you want to have compile artifacts that are based on 11 and could not be run on 8 anymore, then you have the option, the JEP I mentioned a few weeks ago, at the end of the meeting, you get rid of a few issues that could occur if a binary artifact is configured with separate source and target level configurations for Java SE to 8. There was a fix or the change of dropping these 2 separate configurations and get a release property for the Java SE and the Maven use with a lot of small issues that could occur because there is a difference when you run that artifact on a different Java SE runtime.
Right, but I believe if you changed your JDK to like 11 and built it with -release 8, you would be just fine.
Yeah, there are some backwards compatibility to do that, but if you use the 11 to generate that artifact, I think we should mark it as 11 minimum.
Right, so, but why would we do that?
Because of a few issues that could occur otherwise.
No. Why would we compile some? So what we're describing is a whole bunch of major version jumps on specifications that haven't changed. Why would we compile them to 11 when there isn't anything in the API that requires 11 because there are no changes?
You just leave them in their current build structure.
Exactly. Why would we take code that's already been released and perfectly fine, recompile it with 11 and then release it and change the version number, and there's no actual change in the code? Why would we do that?
To show the user or the application developer that he has to use that with a proper Java SE version as a runtime.
But he doesn't.
The runtime, the runtime is not, people could support that still. Okay, let me rephrase. So since the API hasn't changed and there's an existing implementation out there that runs fine with 8, what's the problem?
Right, if the user has an application that works today, it will work tomorrow on the next major version of MicroProfile without the application having to change at all. So,
And yeah, and one thing I think we need to get back to is like remembering that these specifications are usable standalone, right? So, you know, for example, if someone uses REST client, right, it's implemented by CXF, okay? CXF is very commonly used in Spring. Spring people use CXF all the time. If they're using Spring application with CXF and they take advantage of the REST client, and there's a new Jakarta EE version, there's a new MicroProfile umbrella version, they don't care. Their life is not affected at all. Why do they need to be told suddenly their app can no longer run on Java 8 because 2 umbrella specs have changed their perspective on their Java versions? It has nothing to do with the REST client. It has nothing to do with their application. They're not affected at all.
Yeah, but David, as an application developer, when I want to build on the base of JDK 8, which is not common for new projects at the moment.
That's not the point, but keep going.
Yeah. Then you can still use an older version of MicroProfile for that service. That,
why couldn't they? What is the technical change happening in REST client that would make it have to be 5.0?
I will recheck and add that JEP with the issues that could occur when Java SE 8 version is still allowed.
But that doesn't explain anything, right? Because the main question wasn't answered yet. Why, when a specification wants to use JDK 11, or if you say that this specification can now use JDK 11, why do we have to release? Because right now, any specification that we have that was built with 8 can run on any JDK version higher than 8. There's people running apps on 8, 11, 13, 14, even 17. So if we now say, okay, MicroProfile is going to change the language 11 to 11, why should the spec have to re-release all the artifacts just to change the Java version, which we already know that works, without changing a line of their API?
I think that is two things, Roberto. One thing is the kind of the implementation will support like a Java 11 to 17, 18, and etc. The other thing is the kind of this is mainly about compilation version. So it's a kind of at the moment in the other spec is saying 8. So if you want to change that 8 to 11, you have to re-release, right?
well,
You don't have to re-release. I mean, that's why, I mean, this is how Java is based over the last 20 years, right? You have a new Java version or new JDK version coming up, and you don't have to recompile all the artifacts to run on the new Java version. So even on small Y, we are dropping the Java 8 support, and we're going to use 11, but we can still use Java jars built on 8 because that's how the JVM works. It's retrocompatible.
I think
we don't need to rebuild those to use 11.
I think we are still talking about two separate things.
Well,
yeah,
you mentioned the implementation thing, and I'm giving you an example on the implementation side where you can use both 8 and 11. I can require the implementation to use 11, and I don't have to rebuild all the APIs to use 11, right? Because that will be completely crazy. Look for instance into on the Apache Commons libraries. All of them, most of them are still built for 5, and they run fine on any JDK version.
Yeah, I think
that's correct.
What you are saying, I think is talking about two separate things. So what I was saying is that this API can work with kind of the 8 and onwards. What I think is the kind of the proposal is change this compile source.
Yeah, but for no reason.
Why?
That's what we're all trying to say. Why change
Yeah.
it when there's no API changes that need 11?
Yeah. So
Well, I'm not. Yeah, go for it.
so indeed, we need to upgrade whenever we have a feature in our own APIs that needs 11. Whenever tooling requires it, or whenever the upgrade to Jakarta EE10 drags in a dependency on something that is 11 for MicroProfile. That's the only technical requirements that we need to upgrade, right?
Right.
Yeah,
But config, for example, doesn't have any dependencies on Jakarta specifications.
it does on
Well,
the,
CDI,
yeah.
but I mean, and in that regard, the version of CDI that we compile against has nothing to do with what version users could necessarily use in their runtime. So because all the versions are marked provided, we could literally say it runs on CDI 3 or higher, runs on CDI 1.2 or higher.
Yeah, so this API don't need to change. They can continue work with E10. So that's not a problem. So I think it's originally actually I also said is if some spec want to use Java 11 features in their API, they can move up this compiler source. Otherwise, kind of business as usual. So I'm happy if we want kind of reach consensus or do the vote and when to move up to where to move the Java compilation version from 8 to 11. So that's fine. So I think it's for the kind of the, if we say, okay, we'll only move up when we need to. So in this case, like a MicroProfile 6, maybe we don't, even no spec want to move up to 11. So in that case, the most spec don't even need to make a change.
Right, that gives you your widest audience, right? Because you have a broader target market by staying at 8. I mean, since APIs are generally fairly thin, right? They're method declarations. Yeah, and there's some implementation here and there, but they are not the implementations of the API, which are thick and really can begin to exploit new language features. So unless you need records in your API, which might be a reasonable thing to do for a particular API one day, you basically want to try to build against the oldest practical version of Java you can, like 8.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I mean, at one point we're going to be screwed because there will be no supported JDK that does dash release 8 anymore as they start peeling away the old numbers from dash release. And then you have a problem. But until then, you can easily do dash release 8 for the API jars.
Yeah. So, okay, so for this one, do you think we need to do another vote, or majority people think let's stay with Java 8?
Well, I think it's up to the specifications themselves. If they want to introduce new features that take advantage of 11, then that's a different topic. But if that doesn't happen, then then in my mind, there's nothing to discuss.
Okay.
They haven't done anything to take advantage of 11, so therefore, we don't have any grounds to make that decision.
Right. I guess the point there is that we're not imposing a requirement on them to update, so they are free to update as they see fit.
Okay, in this case, how about I change this option, just align with E10, not to mention any compilation version, right?
And that's fine. So I do want to talk about aligning with EE10 as a topic similar to aligning with the JDK version. If a specification isn't taking advantage of any of the changes of EE10, then there is no work for it to do. I mean, there may be TCK changes we want to make, and then we would issue a patch release. But there's, as long as that TCK can still be run on the previous versions, then we should be inclusive.
Yeah.
I mean, like, for example, in MicroProfile JWT, we released a 2.0 with no features in it and said it aligned with Jakarta E9. In that regard, it doesn't you know, to my knowledge, it didn't actually take advantage of anything new. I think the only change was the namespace, right? So I get the namespace as applicable to the TCK. So I get why that was a change, right? Considered a breaking change. The TCK did take advantage of new features, the namespace, but going forward, that's not something that we continue to do simply because we want to, quote unquote, align with a newer version of, some dependency. If we're capable of still running on the older version of the dependency, then we don't need to be communicating any breaking changes because there are none. Is that clear? Because I feel like we acknowledge the namespace change and we did our major upgrades, major version grades, but now we think we always need to do a major version change when a new EE version comes out. We don't.
Right. I think your point there is that it's quite possible that a spec as it stands today will run on EE 9 and 10 without change. So therefore, we don't need to do any revisions to the spec to claim EE 10 support.
Correct.
Yeah,
If there are updates we want to make to the TCK, great. But as long as that TCK can still be run on against the previous EE spec version that it needs, we're simply just fixing compatibility issues or whatever.
I agree. It is the exact same situation as the Java version.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the challenge of running a set of specifications as opposed to one big fat thing, is that they, in some ways, live their own independent lives. They both, they grow up at different rates, and it's a little more challenging for us, but it makes it a lot nicer for our users because they are not forced to change unnecessarily.
Yeah, so that's good. I think that's like a simplified the release greater deal. So I think yeah. So with that, it's just a matrix because it's a backward incompatible changes. So because of that, it's bump the version. So I think for this option 1, we do the 5.1 release in July and then 6.0 in October and November. So we can demonstrate MicroProfile technology like involvement, and also we align with the Jakarta E10. So it's yeah. So we don't need to do this anymore. So this is
We should have that. We should vote on this. That we sounds like it came to some point of agreement, but we should still vote on. We should create some kind of vote so this is codified. We don't roll back.
you mean here, this one.
Kill the zombie.
Java version?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So we should have some sort of formal vote, so that way it's in stone. And if someone comes up, a month from now and says, "Oh, we got to change the versions because we want to use a Java version that's different, but the API doesn't really need it, but we're doing it in umbrella," and that we all understood. If that comes back, we need a reference, a written reference.
Yeah, good point. I think it's like this can be called technical. So we will do a Google group vote, right?
Yeah.
Emily,
Yeah.
please do the voting on the mailing list so it's
Yes.
documented forever. That's one point. And do we have to vote for that now? Because in that option,
No.
we first vote for 5.1 release, right?
I think it is 2 separate vote. So
Yeah.
basically this is
Yeah,
vote,
but
and then
should we do
vote.
any votes for October or November release this year? Because things might change until then.
I don't think this is a vote about the release. It's a vote about the technical topic that changing Java versions does not mandate a spec version update. Aligning with Jakarta EE10 does not necessarily mandate a spec version update. I think those are the things that we're trying to nail down now.
Right.
So yeah, so it's
BJ, do you want to come up with that language? Because I want to make sure the vote captures the essence of it, doesn't subtly ignore the topic.
Resolved. We agree that. Okay, yeah, I'll take it. I'll have a go at some language and send it to Emily.
Okay.
Or
thanks.
you can send it the vote. That doesn't. There's no special person who has the exclusive authority to send votes. So you could
Okay.
send the vote.
Yeah, you can send, okay, BJ, I'll work with you. So
Okay.
direct you to the place you can start the vote.
Thanks,
That's
Dave.
quite nice. Yeah. Okay, so let me see.
But to clarify that, we still want to use a build JDK version, building the API with the release configuration in Maven and for the Java SE configuration, instead of defining separate code and target levels.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Jan. Maybe we can look into it when the time comes when Jakarta E10 has been released. But we look into updating the POM files altogether for the whole platform and see if we know a trip on some thing that we have overseen that will that will anyway trigger the major version upgrade. So I would like to help out with that. Maybe we can then use your the policy like you proposed.
Okay.
And not necessarily using the Java 11 compiler then, but do we can then need the new Maven plugins. We can do an update there.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you,
Yeah.
Adam.
And just a
Yeah.
quick circle back, BJ, if you feel free to send a note out to the list saying, here's the text that I'm thinking of proposing. Does anybody want to give some feedback on it? And then if you don't get anything, go ahead and start the vote.
Gotcha.
That way you can like, because otherwise sometimes people like will pick apart the text when they completely agree with the vote, right? I agree with the vote, but you said this wrong. And then they say -1 and you're at square one again. So
Yeah.
go
So,
ahead and shoot the text out, and if we can get that kind of feedback flushed out, and then you can put the vote up.
Okay, makes sense. I take that advice.
yeah, sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, David. Thanks, BJ. Okay, so that's good. So this is make the clarify a lot of things. Okay, that's option one for the release. So basically recap 5.1 and then 6.0. And then it's option two. Option two, we just do a kind of 6.0 release. So it's include everything. So basically it's again, it's kind of we'll do the change for the Jakarta and also include some change for the JWT like 2.1 and also matrix 5.0, open API 3.1, and then open tracing will remove, and the rest of the client and the telemetry. So basically the only difference between the option 2 and option 1 is we just merge everything and do one release. So I think is the process kind of we also align with the E10 and also at the same time at the same time we're making progress with the specs. And the cons is we pretty much depend on like Jakarta E10 kind of release, and also hope like everything will go well. And then we feel like put a lot of effort in one release. And then last release, it was December. And then we could just feel like we do kind of 11 months or 10 months apart. So this is kind of the for the option 2. For options 3, is we do a kind of July release. Is pretty much is we just feel like there might be some TCK changes, and maybe this will be a kind of minor change for the TCK change. And then the only thing is kind of this is a marker for removal. So this is kind of the 5.1 this will be like because of Jakarta E10 change and some spec met TCK might change. So that's for the July release, and for the October release, again, is kind of we do the alignment with Jakarta E10. So this probably is the kind of no change. This is a no change, and this will be a no change, and GWT would be a 2.1 release. Matrix 5.0 open API will be 3.1, and then open tracing will directly removed. And there is a kind of REST client and telemetry. This will be the new spec. Again, the process kind of aligned with the Jakarta E10. The cons is 5.1 has not much value to the end user. So pretty much we feel something may not work, we just do the change. So it's again, it's kind of the even though we have a 5.1 from an end user point of view, they don't need to consume anything from the 5.1. So it's again, this is pretty much like from an end user point of view, we have one release, which is the October release. So this is the quick run through of this all the options. So are there any comments or something else? Any comments? By the way, thank you, Edwin, for your comments. Edwin, do you want, since you already thought about these options, do you want to say anything about these options?
Well, yeah, I think what I wrote down still stands. Just a little bit less heavy this time because there's no major upgrade for all the specifications apparently. I hope so that holds true because otherwise we will have to do it anyway. But I think if we, from an end user perspective, if you have two releases, then I can profit earlier from new innovation. But with the second release, there's less innovation for me. But if we do it together in one release, I have to wait a little bit longer, a few months, and then I get my innovation plus the Jakarta E10 alignment. So both will be fine, I guess, unless some end users are really spamming us with your release now because I'm waiting for it. But otherwise, we could decide to wait until October, November. But then if something comes up and we have to push the release into the new year, if things go down really hard, for example, then innovation will be out even further. So yeah, I think there's no real reason to wait, but also no real reason not to wait for with innovation release. So just my thoughts.
Yeah, I would just say that option 2 and 3 are largely the same.
Yeah.
You know, and so basically the only difference between 2 and 3 is that there's a 5, 1, and somewhere in the middle. And I would say that, you know, there's no reason for us to avoid doing releases if we want to make fixes to TCKs and things like that, so people can work on their EE10 compliance in parallel leading up to the 6.0 release. Not all releases have to be advertised and loudly publicized. It's possible for us to just cut stuff, make the APIs available, and let the vendors use it. Doesn't mean, what I'm trying to say is that there's very practical difference between doing no release, no practical difference from the user's perspective between doing no release so that they have nothing to look at and doing a 5.1 release to help vendors, but still not tell them. Either way, they don't see a release.
Yeah, from an end user point of view, I think the option 2 and the 3 are pretty much the same.
Yeah, that's what I say. So we could just merge them. And if vendors want to do patch releases to the TCKs to help get their stuff to run as they're pursuing 10.
Okay.
That's
so,
fine.
Why not why not let them do it?
Yeah,
But
So
Emily,
you sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, there's one question I kind of forgot. From a vendor perspective and from our perspective, if you do two releases, two full-blown releases for option 1, for example, then you have to go through the whole process 2 times, which might on vendor side and our Eclipse kind of side double work. So that I think we also have to take that into consideration, that you don't do 2 releases just because you promised it in the program plan.
Yeah. Yes, so there's no point to do releases for the sake of the releases. So the only do releases because we can bring a value to the end user, and then is if like we need to do release, we want to do a lightweight release for the implementers, so we can do it whenever we want. So in this case, we could consolidate this option, just 2 and 3 to be 1. Basically they are similar. So it's basically kind of, we just say option 1, we do a release 5.1, and then in July, and then 6.0 in October, November. And then the second option 2 and 3 is pretty much do a release 6.0 with all the changes in October, November. So if someone, if we need to do any kind of release in the middle, we just do a quick release, but not make a big splash of it, because it's kind of if we don't advertise any new APIs or change anything meaningful to customers, it's no point. So
yeah, from my perspective, as a comment, doing a minor release, there is no risk. The last weeks, the problem with that might be we need a compatible implementation doing that release, there was nobody offering that at the moment, as far as I know. So if we go for option 1, we need for both somebody. And,
really.
let me just finish, Emily, please.
Yeah.
If something important is missing in 5.1 for any reason, because some vendor might need to have a MicroProfile release sooner, that's possible too, if there is a compatible implementation that doing a July or August release if necessary, if something. So the way is straightforward, only it's a little bit more work in the working group. And of course, compatible implementation needs to do these releases from my perspective. So it's a low risk option.
So it's MicroProfile 5.1. I'm willing to use the Open Liberty to drive the release. So it's no, that's not a problem. It's in this one, I think is with this, I know is kind of use the Liberty at least to test all the updated spec and a new spec. And then when we do the 6, hopefully it's really is only metrics change. And also Jakarta Eaton, hopefully by then Open Liberty also, is one of the candidates to drive the release out.
Oh yeah, a couple of comments. So one, and I didn't mention this in the last call, I think that, well, it is what it is because that's already on the document. I think that we should start changing this process a little bit in the sense that just agree on the content that you want to release and figure out the versioning later, because basically we're mixing 2 completely separate topics, which is the content that we want on each release and how we're going to version this release. And when we mix both, then it's really hard to get an agreement, because some people think that some particular content should be major, some other particular content should be minor. And if we separate those conversations, I think we can focus a little bit more on what we actually want to accomplish. The second one is this option actually goes against what we just agreed on, or I think we have a consensus on, which is having a Jakarta or a Java version alignment doesn't require a major version. And that's what we actually prefer is if we do now a release that does the alignment without any particular big changes, and that you can call that as 5.1, and then we do the major changes and whatever other big bang or new features as a big bang release, right? Because I mean, if you think about this, even in a marketing perspective, right? You're saying you do like a 5.1, you're putting like a new ton of things over there, right? And then people think about that, oh, it's a 5.1, it's just like a minor, I'm not going to care about it. Then you have to do a tremendous amount of work of marketing to tell people that you have a lot of new things over there. And then you do like a 6.0 with the Jakarta 10 release, and the specs are pretty much the same, right? Because you already do a lot of the changes on 5.1. So even for a market perspective, in my opinion, that doesn't make much sense, because you want your major version to align with a lot of the work you have done, not the other way around.
So one thing is that I think is again back to the version kind of discussion. So for the 5.1, because you could say is because this is backward compatible with the previous version. So for the 6.0, the reason is need to be 6.0 because the matrix has backward incompatible changes. So it's so that's why it need to be a major release.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're at the point where everyone understands the options, maybe we should, and we can agree that there are just two options, really. You know what I mean? Then I think we could probably vote. I just want to make sure there are not three options, because then we're splitting the vote, right? We would end up if we had three options and we got 1/3 for option 1 and 1/3 for option 2 and 1/3 for option 3, we would go, geez, we don't know which one won. But obviously, since 2 and 3 are largely the same, there would be a 2/3 majority, right, on not doing option 1 and going for option 2, right? So my preference would be for option 2 for a lot of the reasons Roberto said. I think that if we continue to issue major versions that have nothing in them but breaking changes, and all the major features are the majority of the major cool stuff is in the patch release, I think we are marketing against ourselves, to be honest.
But that's the kind of drawback is we just have one releases that we put all the things in one basket.
I would prefer that versus, yeah, but and that's where it comes down to preference, right?
Anyway, we can just all send for the vote. Let's agree on like the like wording for the vote. So we have option 1. So basically release 5.1 with component changes with the matrix, open tracing, JWT, and open API. Option release this one in July, and release MP 6.0 with matrix 5.0 backward incompatible changes, plus Jakarta EE 10 alignment.
I think your document's great. Actually, we could use that for the vote. You could just paste that into the email and then say, and have people vote for the option that they want. We just need to merge option 2 and 3 before that email is sent.
So in this case, like, do we just delete the option 3 then?
Or we could just say for the July 2.5.1 release that release is optional.
Okay.
And it would be if someone wants to drive it because they have TCK changes. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And then basically 2 and 3, are the same. Meaning if someone steps forward and they're going to do a TCK release and they want to go through the whole, certification process with their stuff, we're going to let them. But other than that,
yeah, good point. So in this case, like we just have two options. And then this just do a optional thing. We just vote on this. In this case, I will delete this one. Yeah, because that would be a separate vote for the Java compilation version change. So that's kind of quite clear now. And are there any final kind of comments for this vote?
Yes, regarding the marketing discussion, from the user perspective, I really want to know if there is a breaking change that affects me, and not only the developer wants to know that, also the project management wants to know that, because that might mean I have to spend some time for the version bump in my project, and that could take more than one sprint, depending on the complexity of the project. While a minor change should be done with less amount of investment, bumping the MicroProfile version. So I'm totally fine with a release that gives me a sign, this is a major release, so I should expect breaking changes and need to invest some time. While a minor release shows me, I can get new features, but I don't have to use all of them.
Yeah.
Just to comment on, if I could jump in real quick, to comment on that though, and you're absolutely correct, that is the way conversations happen internally. If we were to shove all of our awesomeness in the patch version and save only the major versions for breaking changes, and if those versions had no awesomeness in them, you would also be unable to convince your management to let you upgrade to the major version because it only brings pain. They would say, wait until the next version that has major features in it, and then you can go ahead and do the upgrade. We're not going to spend time only paying down technical debt for no benefit.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird situation, but it is based on what MicroProfile always has been doing. On paper, breaking change, major release, non-breaking change, minor release. So I think I heard marketing against ourselves. I think that's correct. Well, beginning to be a reality.
Yeah, I think it's important that we stay consistent. Major version means there's a breaking changes. So
yeah, we can do breaking changes in major versions. We should only do breaking changes in major versions.
Yes.
But we should also have some motivation for people to actually endure the pain of the break. There should be good features in there too.
Yes.
We can't have a major version that only has breaking changes and no good stuff, because then people are just going to skip those releases.
I agree.
I want to say something about that, because if I look to the other side of my window and then see Spring Framework is now on release 5 major in the 20 years that it exists, and 6 is coming up. Every release of Spring has a potential to break stuff, minor, major, patch, whatever. That's how Spring is built, but it works. So if a major release from Spring comes out, 5 or 6, then it's a happening. There is big stuff coming in there, but it's not necessarily focusing on whether stuff breaks or not. You can expect stuff to break or not, because it's in the marketing. Upgrading Spring means check your stuff because you might have broken something. It's a different approach from what we use for MicroProfile. Maybe we can get a little bit of inspiration there as we talk about whether or not we want to have empty breaking releases.
But there's an important structural difference, though. Spring is a implementation. It's a giant wad of code. It is not a specification, which is primarily what MicroProfile is. And so you can't necessarily equate behavior between those two kinds of things.
Right. Yeah.
That's true, but I think the heart of the statement is a release of only breaks is not necessarily in our favor.
Correct.
Yeah, I agree, but I don't have that fear for the upcoming major release of MicroProfile. Because even if there are not too much changes in MicroProfile, then I can use, for example, a new REST version and all the things that coming from Jakarta into it. And there was a lot of investment getting new features in Jakarta EE10.
Sure, but
that's
why I would vote for option 2, because I get everything. All these things are addressed.
I'm assuming that also gives you the new version of CDI and all the other, the various parts of MicroProfile that come from Jakarta that aren't listed in this table here, which maybe could be listed to show how much more you're getting out of the bigger bang.
Yeah, I reiterate my comments that if all the goodness is coming from a different community, not ours, we're still marketing against ourselves, right? So if we list a major version change and 0 MicroProfile innovation is in it, and all the innovation comes from external sources, that's still us shining a light on lack of activity and only breaking changes. We're killing ourselves if we do that.
Jan, a question for you. You're saying that you're okay because you'll use all the stuff coming from Jakarta 10, and there's a lot of stuff coming over there. But do you feel comfortable moving to Jakarta 10? And then if you're trying to use something from MicroProfile that doesn't work because basically we don't have support for that?
You are talking about open tracing, right?
No, I'm not talking about tracing in general. I mean, we know for a fact that we're not able to run the TCKs in Jakarta 10, right? So nobody can assure you that all the implementations are actually going to behave as they should in a Jakarta 10 runtime. So my question was, even if you go and move to Jakarta 10, are you going to be okay if something on MicroProfile is not working in breaks?
That's now I understand. No, I really would dislike that because I really still want to use MicroProfile. So I need to wait until there's a combined Jakarta EE and MicroProfile release. In this case, EE10 and MP6.
Okay, so basically what we're saying over here is we have an option that's going to give you what you want, but it's going to be postponed until the end of the year versus another option that can give you what you want earlier and the rest later.
Correct.
So, okay, so that's a great conversation. Let's reach the top of the hour. So I think we achieved our goal for today's meeting. So at least we consolidated the options and then it can put up for the vote. So, so BJ, you go ahead to start voting on the Java version, and then I will do a vote on the release. So both vote will be on the Google group, and they are not directly dependent on each other. So with that, thank you so much. I think we had a greater conversation here, and eventually I think people all understand all the kind of options and etc. And this is great. Thanks.
That's great.
Bye, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks, everybody.